G'day legends, I hope that you're having a fantastic day and importantly a fantastic Friday leading into what I hope is a fantastic weekend. Now today, as always, we have a lot to go over. We're going to look at some air defense that has been struck, some strikes against drone boats and what may be now defensive actions for that. We'll look at some missiles that have gone into Ukraine. As we know, overnight Russia has launched another large attack and there's been multiple explosions reported across multiple cities. And we'll talk about the power grid. We need to talk about economic sanctions against Russia and how that is looking and what China has said about that, and then the influence of the yen. And of course, then we'll have a look at the maps and see what is changing on the maps. Now, we don't have anything of what these missiles overnight have hit or have not hit. With any missile reporting, it is almost impossible, I believe, to get a real firm answer on what it is. We know it's highly illegal in Ukraine to film any of these missile impacts or anything to do with them at all. So we're going off official statements, we're going off claims. It can be difficult, but we haven't even had really any of that. The only thing I've seen at all that says something about where these are headed for is out into the west of Ukraine. Now, as you can see, what this will be targeting is then that airfield of which we've seen multiple missiles target very recently. Now, one big thing these missiles, these drones have had a huge effect on over the past, well, over the war, but particularly in the past couple of months, is Ukraine's power grid, its energy systems, and it really is looking like it is on its last legs. And this is a huge problem. Firstly, you have the massive morale issue. And of course, this is exacerbated if you can't charge your phone, you don't have internet, you don't have heating, you can't warm your stove up, and well, it may be on gas, but you know what I mean. And of course, that influences your living standards and that has a huge impact. And of course, then there's issues for frontline actions. Of course, morale is a huge part of this, and we know that's already becoming a problem, but you have issues with fuel because then you need to run generators, not only for shops, but then on the front line to recharge batteries for drones or for night fighting equipment. Generators then have a heat signature. Okay, so then you use power banks. Well, power banks need to be plugged into mains somewhere to then charge up. And this is going to get worse heading into the latter in the year. And of course, then the colder weather. So let's have a look over that first, as I think this is a bigger problem than a lot of people are discussing. That this is from Kyiv Independent. Ukrainians could face up to 20 hours of blackouts a day, a worst case scenario. Now, some of my friends there, they're saying that it's already in areas of this currently. Even if the country makes repairs without missiles for air defense systems, Russia can easily keep targeting the energy system as it wants. So they'll just keep hitting. And this is the thing, you can never have enough air defense to cover everything. Those F-16s come in on that airfield, a lot of air defense is going to have to get allocated there. Ukraine want to, have a push in the east. Air defense is going to have to get allocated there. And there's always going to be areas of which you can't have it. Under what it considers the worst case scenario, DTEC itself would continue to run with about 10% of pre-war levels of thermal power generation. Let's continue here. Large plants could start feeling the absence of electricity in November. Defence enterprises could feel the squeeze in December, and crucial infrastructure like water sewage systems in January 25. So still saying a while off, but that squeeze will happen. So firstly on the population, but then on these larger plants and enterprises. Now, this guy here is saying this is very close to realistic right now. Regarding what will happen this winter, we are heading very quickly into this. Now, we've seen Zelensky talk about these drone attacks have destroyed 9 gigawatts of Ukraine's capacity of total energy. The peak energy consumption last winter was 18 gigawatts. Half of that is now gone. Ukraine Oil and Gas giant Naftogaz said at a conference it will be impossible to get another 9 gigawatts by winter. So it's going to be another hard winter. They're now into the third winter of this war. One big elephant in the room holding DTEC back from attracting finance is its owner, Ukrainian oligarch Rinat Akhmetov. The European Bank of Reconstruction and Development, this EBRD, they have said they're very selective with whom it works with in Ukraine, and that's it. It does not work with oligarchs. So, of course, there's a huge problem there that they won't work with the owner then of DTEC. So that is a huge problem. But this is something of which will become an issue. And of course, this affecting civilians and soldiers and everything has an effect on morale. We already know, everyone I speak to, and I speak to multiple people offline, and there's a few interviews coming, they speak about one of the biggest changes they've seen is morale, of how people are feeling. And you see, of course, then the red on the map this year, all we've seen, and we'll look at the map in a second, we see just Russia making ground. So of course that has a morale impact. But the two guys I've spoken to recently, one will be an interview and one was a personal chat. Actually, there was a third one which can only be released on certain triggers. If something happens, then I can release the interview for family and friends and everything. Is actually talking about what happened in Kharkiv. Now, we know that this has, well, we don't know, but it's basically stalled out compared to what then it was. We don't see any change up here, but then yesterday we did see that Ukraine confirmed that Russia has entered then this area here, as well as taken more positions here, built defensive works. But what all three of these gentlemen talked to me about was, okay, regardless of what happened here frontline, the morale fallout of what guys felt seeing this and how they felt like they've been stabbed in the back was insane. And upon like further asking, like, what do you mean? They're like, well, we're down here fighting, giving our lives, giving all we can. And obviously the corruption has been just wrought through here, that areas weren't built, people pocketed money, there's investigations, all this, and Russia was able to just walk across here. That us down in other areas, and these guys are working in the south and the east, were saying we see that, and that's just had a huge effect on like, right, who's actually backing us up here? That this alone, forget about what ground was taken. The ground as far as primary goals is insignificant, but the effect that this had on morale on the front line and other areas was massively significant. And the guy last night said it was one of the biggest morale issues from the entire war that he has seen, then having huge effect on guys. And don't ever discount how important that then is. Now, let's actually have a look at the maps, then we'll talk about what's happened to Russia's economy. So let's have a look here. Now, of course, here we have Ukraine, the center, the capital of Kyiv. The red areas occupied since 2022, the purple since 2014. Now, we don't really see many updates on this map. Syriac is still away, but let me show you. So we'll come down just north of Bakhmut, this Vesely Rozdalivka front. We do have a lot of filling in of gaps in here. Now, some geolocated footage and some other maps have shown this to be fairly similar to this now for a week or so, but it is important to say that this Seversk front here, there is very little movement on here. So when you start seeing movement, you know that heavily defended areas have then fallen back. Even the Russians in here have commented on how good the Ukrainian defensive lines are in and around the Seversk front. So we've seen some changes there, no changes in Bakhmut. And then we come down to Avdiivka. We just see one small change out from this Novopokrovsky heading into then this Novoselivska, Persha as well. Now, of course, moving along the urban areas to envelop then the open areas of where you don't want to be, and then taking that ground back. We saw the same thing happen in Semenivka and Berdachi front, and this is actually backed up as well with then this geolocation. So this is a Russian flag being raised. Here we see the troops, and we see flag raised, sorry, cut just there, and then this is then geolocated to see where this road then turns to the east. Of course, this is this road. So deep state showing further push out from here. But this does put these areas at risk, these open areas, just like this Ulmansk and Netelyove front, and this enter into Nevelsky as well. So it'll be interesting to see once Syriac comes back what he is then showing and what he shows separately on the maps. But as far as the maps, that's all then I have for you today. But I've got some footage in some other areas and geolocated on the maps to show, but meaning movements. So this reservoir in Kharkiv, which we can see here, has been struck, then this bridge, with a Russian missile. Now, in my eyes, this isn't going for then the bridge here. It is trying to target, I think, one of these vehicles moving, maybe, but it doesn't look like there is too much damage, if any, to then the bridge itself. But things like this are important for logistics. Now, I believe, I could be wrong, I believe that this is geolocated to here. So this is Kharkiv, this is Holoberki, this is Vovchansky down in here, and a strike here. Now, I actually think we've seen multiple strikes before against this specific bridge. But again, take a grain of salt. I'm pretty sure this is the same area, but I could be then wrong. So where we're looking down in here, this is, of course, occupied Crimea, just to the northeast of Sevastopol. We do have a Russian air defense system has been damaged and or destroyed down in here. So this was a photograph from the first of this system sitting here, and you can see where this lines up to the geolocation. And then today we get this photograph showing an amount of destroyed equipment here, said to be a 92 N6 radar, a generator tractor, and a launch unit for an S-400 system. Russia has had a very, very hard week for air defense systems, and we'll see how then that goes into the future. And there's another strike here that I don't have a geolocation for this, but this is apparently a very new modern piece of equipment called an R416GM, and this is a Russian mobile communications system then being struck, said to be by Ukrainian special forces. So you can see this here, and then a strike on this system, and then of course the system being, as far as we're aware, looks completely destroyed from there. So there's been a lot of strikes everywhere. And what a lot of people have talked about now, of course, that last one was a drone, but say these like air defense systems down in Crimea here, that talking to a few guys and reading a little bit about air defense, the more stuff they have. So it was said that 12 missiles got fired at this, 7 got shot down before this was destroyed, similar to other systems that we have seen hit by things like ATACMS. But the more they are used, the more data Russia has on them to develop their own algorithms to then counter these. And many of people I've spoken to offline have said, yes, these are important systems, but is it worth hanging on to the ATACMS and keeping that engagement rate very high as it is in the beginning of the new weapon system for when they're going to actually be used? What do you mean by that? Well, when the F-16s come in here and want to fly out over the Black Sea, okay, soften up those AD systems then while the ATACMS is very, very useful, or wait until you're going to be having an offensive somewhere so you can hit then the FABs. That if you lose then the how effective that system is and it starts dropping, which happens each time it's used, well, you can see where that goes if there's not a direct counter coming up behind it. So there may be that. And it's same with the Excalibur shell. Within weeks, few months, the Excalibur fell by over 90% effective. And all weapon systems have that. All weapon systems, Russian, Ukrainian, regardless, that it's developed against it. So, yeah, people said, is it worth using now? Maybe wait. Or are the F-16s closer than we believe? Are movements closer? Then, again, that's speculation. We don't know. Now, another little bit of footage here, and this has come out. Now, I want to read what this Russian page said first on this. This complex, the same one with the BMP-2, successfully destroyed unmanned boats with the help of its missile. Responsive industry gave to the enemy's use of BECs, so these are the drone boats. Engineers do not sleep. They're looking for a solution. Seen sound from the problem. Left to do is massively introduce a combination of threat endpoints to the Black Sea, so using both missiles and machine gun against these. Now, I think this is maybe being misreported, maybe not in that one I read, but online of this is actually taking out Ukrainian drones. I actually believe this footage is training. So we can see these drone boats here moving fairly slow and then hit by the missile. We see a third one hit by a missile, but it's when it comes to the color that we see this in this red and white. Now, my view on this would be you'd paint something like this. This is like putting your yellow and black things on the dummies in a car crash, like a testing crash for a rating, to see the movement and have an idea of speed behind it. So this to me doesn't look like live footage. This looks like training footage. We know that Russia is developing specific training against these drone boats. Now, we have heard now for over 2 years that there is this imminent collapse of the Russian army coming, and many bloggers are still upholding this from day one when they were talking about this imminent collapse to now, even though all their predictions have been incorrect since. And I don't know how their audiences go along with it, but regardless, that there's been this imminent collapse coming of the Russian military, Russian society going back against the Kremlin, and the Russian economy. And all three of these have been far more resilient to losses than many have appreciated. But there has been some changes economically against Russia, as well as we'll look at what China has said in this. Now, we'll read out this, that Russians see little fallout after US sanctions hit dollar exchange trade. Business expects costs to rise, but little else to change. The latest round of US sanctions effectively ended 3 decades of daily exchange trading in the dollar for Russia's ruble that first began in the twilight of the Soviet Union. US restrictions aimed at further isolating Moscow from the international financial system over its war in Ukraine, halting trading on several markets. So that is basically what has happened. We'll look at what actually then occurred on the market, saying that instead of trading over the counter, where deals are conducted directly between two parties, central bank said it would use data from those trades to set official exchange rate. So this is from the Russian central bank. Central bank reassured people these deposits were secure. Companies, individuals can continue to buy and sell US dollars and euros through Russian banks. One person, a non-sanctioned Russian commodities exporter, told Reuters, "We don't care, we have the yen. Getting dollars and euros in Russia is practically impossible." With Moscow pursuing closer trade and political ties with Beijing, Chinese yen has ousted the dollar to become the MOEX's most traded currency, accounting for 53.6% of all foreign currency traded in May. And like we've spoken about with many of these sanctions and all of this, what does it do? Okay, sanctions Russia, has an effect on their economy and maybe to finance war. But what also does it do? It pushes Russia to find other areas to fill those gaps that have been taken away, and they're looking towards China and looking like a lot of that is then getting backfilled. And we'll see what China has said then about this as well. The UK has done similar. Dozens of sanctions constraining Russian war in Ukraine, including targeting Moscow's main stock exchange. Sanctions the first vessels on Putin's so-called shadow fleet. China has said it firmly opposed Britain's decision to include 5 Chinese firms in the sanctions. And we'll look at what China has directly said against this. But Rishi, you've used the words. You've used the words you're not meant to use. The G7 doing everything we can to help Ukraine defend itself against Russian aggression. We've just announced a game-changing package of support for Ukraine, funded by profits from frozen Russian assets. You're not meant to use the game-changing word, mate. But let's look at let's have a look at then what has changed on this, and then we'll have a look at what China has said. So you can see here, of course, over the last 5 days, a dip when this was announced and then trading slightly higher. Now, you can see this as people are forced to buy and or sell other currencies. You will see some early ups and downs. We saw this if we go over the 5 years when the war initially started. So of course you see this huge dip when the war began, late Feb, early March, and then of course with whatever that system is to buy US dollars. We don't use it in Australia, but whatever it is called. Then we see, of course, they had to trade in all these to buy rubles. So, of course, then you see the ruble go up, but you can see the ruble has been declining through 2023 and then stable to increasing over 2024 as well. Being, like I said, far more resilient than people would think. But like I said as well, this pushes China and Russia closer together. And this could be a problem in the multipolar world of which we are running into very quickly. Now, this is for what the UK and Rishi has announced against Chinese entities as well. And this is from the Chinese embassy in London. The relevant sanctions by the UK are unilateral action with no basis in international law. On the Ukraine issue, China's position is firm and consistent. We're committed to promoting talks for peace. To this end, China and Brazil jointly issued 6 common understandings on political settlement of the Ukraine crisis, recently stressing the 3 principles for de-escalating the situation, namely, no expansion of the battlefield, no escalation of fighting, no provocation by any party must be observed, and calling on all parties to uphold dialogue and negotiation, increase humanitarian assistance, oppose the use of nuclear weapons and attacks on nuclear plants, and protect the stability of global industrial and supply chains. The UK government, in disregard of public opinion at home and in the world, has been fueling the tension. This has contributed to the protracted war and sufferings and made peace even more elusive. We urge the UK government to immediately rectify its wrongdoing and revoke sanctions against Chinese companies. The Chinese government will take firm and strong measures to defend the legitimate rights and interests of Chinese enterprises. So very firmly worded from the ambassador here to the UK against what has then taken place. So let's actually look at then these peace talks, and then we'll look at the G7 and money for Ukraine. So we know Ukraine has spoken a lot about that Russia will try and discredit the peace conference that's taking place in Switzerland this weekend. Of course, Russia and China will not be present. China skipping a weekend summit on a peace plan for Ukraine has been lobbying governments for its alternative plan. 10 diplomats said, with one calling Beijing's campaign a subtle boycott of the global meeting in Switzerland. 90 states and organisations have registered to take part in the summit on Saturday and Sunday in an alpine resort in Lucerne. Of course, this peace plan is to try and get more support for Ukraine to achieve its goals through what it shows as its 10-point peace plan. Points 5 and 6 in that is territorial integrity and the retaking of that land. So that has to be done militarily with the situation of what we see. Therefore, more is going to have to go in. After China said it was not going to Lucerne summit, Zelensky accused Beijing of helping Moscow undermine the meeting. What we know is China has said it hasn't met then the standards that it would set for the beginning of peace negotiations. The United States and Western governments had lobbied hard for China to attend the talks. In conversations with developing nations, China has not overtly criticised the Swiss Peace Summit or directly asked countries to abstain. What they've said is it doesn't meet their requirements for this. While explaining why it will not attend the summit, China has been trying to enlist developing nations to join the 6-point peace plan it issued with Brazil last month. The proposal calls for an international peace conference held at a proper time that is recognised by both Russia and Ukraine, with equal participation of all parties, as well as a fair discussion of all peace plans. So China's trying to get their own peace summit going that includes everyone. 45 countries have expressed support for the proposal. So it will be very interesting to see where this then goes. And China is a very, very, very important player in this war. One, they have a lot to benefit from this. Two, if China starts supporting Russia militarily, that will change the entire landscape of the war like that due to China's industrial and economic power. And as well, China is wanting to seek an end to this war and are on the UN Security Council. They're a major player around the world. And like I said, they have a lot to benefit from this. But let's talk about money and funding to Ukraine and how this has changed. A group of 7 summit opened with an agreement reached by proposal by the United States to back the $50 billion and the $75 billion, this is Australian dollar dues, loan to Ukraine using frozen Russian assets as collateral. So those assets, what it makes on top of the windfall profits, will then be transferred to Ukraine in frozen Russian assets held in Europe. A lot of people have spoken and expressed concern about could this undermine security in the dollar, the euro, the pound for, say, Chinese billionaires saying, well, look at what you've done here. Okay, we're going to withdraw our money. Many people have expressed concern with this. We also know there's been a 10-year security agreement between President Biden and President Zelensky. The deal aims to commit future US administrations to support Ukraine. Officials said they hoped the agreement would transcend political divisions in the United States, but acknowledged that Trump or any future president could withdraw from legally binding executive agreement. So other administrations could then pull out of this. We're not exactly sure what will happen if Trump then gets into power. One thing I will say is you will see a lot of information campaign attacking either administration leading into the elections, and just keep an eye out for that, because you will see sides of which want a party to win in this very, very important election will be bashing one side or promoting another. So keep an eye out for that. I think it'll be obvious, but regardless, the pact does not commit Washington to supply troops to defend Ukraine if attacked, but commits the US to hold high-level consultations with Kyiv in 24 hours if Ukraine is attacked in the future. So wouldn't that happen anyway? The US will continue to train Ukraine's military, deepen cooperation on defense industry production, and share more intelligence than currently. And it will try and build Ukraine's long-term deterrent power across different domains: air, sea, cyber. So again, this is being hailed, I think, higher than maybe it is. What all this is trying to do is lay groundwork so it's easier for NATO entry if and when the war then ends. This isn't a war like we're going to go to war for you. And this isn't a Q&A with the White House. So today, G7 meeting, the discussion focused on developing Ukraine's air defense system based on the most advanced Western complexes. Can you provide any details on initiative about the readiness for our allies to take part? So, of course, Ukraine wanting more air defense. We spoke about that with the energy structures in the beginning. I'd be happy to respond to that. We've acquired commitment from 5 countries so far for Patriot batteries and other air defense systems, as well as let it be known to these countries they are expecting from us air defense systems in the future that they're going to have to wait. So countries that have either ordered or are waiting on supply of Patriot systems and air defense systems from the US are going to have to wait. Everything we have is going to go to Ukraine until their needs are met. We know there's a lot. I could, if I was Zelensky, I'd be a little bit like, you say this, you say that it's, all this support, whatever, but you could give us that equipment. You're just not. It's a bit rich to be like, everything we have is going, and then sending 30 Abrams and not supplying F-16s and this and that and training 12 pilots. There's a bit of a difference on the wording and the reality there, and like I spoke about in this morning's video with Macron talks about we want to deploy soldiers, we'll support you to the end. Can we have Rafales? Can we have Leclercs? No. But regardless, the air defense systems, we know Germany has said they can't give any more than the one they've given over their third, but the US, we will see in this. Legends, I hope that you're leading into a fantastic weekend. I'll speak to you tomorrow. Thank you. Bye-bye.